I have a slightly different show and tell, and this will be the segue to our esteemed guest. I showed this last month because we had the infamous artist that put this together. So Cruising the Fossil Freeway book. If you don't have this, get it, because the author is with us tonight. That's the follow-up to that. Cruising the Fossil Coastline. I keep wanting to say Eternal Coastline.
Bring your computer here.
What's that?
Okay.
Can't hear you. And then I'm not sure if this is a predecessor.
Oh yeah, the first one.
Is that your first book?
Yeah.
So
1995.
It's a fun read. If you guys haven't seen this one, it's kind of neat just because there's really great pictures with it. I like the artwork, but it just kind of takes you through time, and it's a good one. And then here's another book.
Best time ever.
Yep. What's that?
That was the best time ever. Those
Best
70
time.
days.
So the video on this, I believe it's a Nova program. Is that right?
Yeah.
So that one's out there. There's a great video on the Snow Mastodon. If you guys aren't familiar with that, Kirk was all involved when he was with Denver Museum there. And this is a great kind of book. I've read through this one. It has all the details. This one is nonfiction. So it's a really good one. And how many don't I have, Kirk?
Couple, 3, 4 more.
Okay,
Like
I'll
that.
keep working on it.
I think there's 10 altogether.
10? Okay.
Yeah, but who's counting?
Yeah. Definitely not me.
Collectors, I do. So, well, the introduction to Kirk is almost the same as my introduction to Ray that I gave last month. I am really humbled that Kirk's willing to come to our meeting and talk with us. I met Kirk and Ray when they came to visit in Lincoln City to promote Cruising the Fossil Freeway book. And they were doing the research for Cruising the Eternal Coastline, which ended up being Cruising the Fossil Coastline. And they came to visit Wally because they'd heard about it ahead of time. And we're going to give you a great update. For those of you who know about Wally, we have a really great update on that we'll give at the closure of this. But they came to visit Wally and Bruce, and they had heard of us, and we had heard of them, and we met with the meeting of the minds over pizza and beer at the brew pub, and we've been in contact ever since. And I'm just thrilled to have Kirk with us tonight. So I can shut up and hand it over to you. It's all you.
Thanks. Well, it's great to be here because I grew up in Seattle and did a lot of my early getting hooked on fossils on the West Coast in Seattle and Oregon. And there was a 1963 issue of National Geographic that had a little spot about Doug Emlong on it. And there was a picture of Doug chipping away on some pectins and a couple of Desmostylus teeth that really stuck in my mind when I was like 4 or 5 years old. And my dad's from California. We lived in Seattle. So we used to drive from Seattle to California down the coast route every year, back and forth a couple of times. So all the beaches that you guys work, I was introduced to when I was like 5 years old. And that's sort of the root of the whole thing. And then when I was 13, I found myself lucky enough to get behind the scenes at the Burke Museum in Seattle with Wes Weir, who's a artist and paleobotanist. And he told me that he wanted to do something. So, mute there, Rick. Thanks a lot for that.
We need to make sure everybody turns their microphones off, please.
Get that away from him. Get it away from him. Get it away.
We're good? All right. So it was Wes taught me that basically if you want to become a scientist, all you have to do is start writing letters to scientists and they'll write you back. It actually works. So I met Wes when I was 13 years old, and I gave his eulogy when he died about 35 years later. He's like, me, Ruth and Gar know him really well. And that that launched me in a career of paleontology. And then I went eventually to the Denver Museum, where I spent most of my career, 22 years at the Denver Museum. And that's where I started collaborating with Ray Troll, who you talked to last time. And then in 2012, I moved to the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C. And I thought lots of things I could talk to you about tonight, but we opened in June of 2019, we opened the National Fossil Hall exhibit. And I want to just talk to you about how the hall came together and what it took to build the hall. Kent was out for the opening of the hall, which is great. And I'm going to switch to pictures, and I'll just run through about 50 slides and answer some questions for you. So give me just a second while I share the screen here. And so that, is that working for everybody?
Yeah, we can see it. And pardon me, but Peg and Rick, can you get Rick's computer to mute, please? Because we can still hear you guys. Thanks.
So this is one of my little friends, Abeba. I have kids come to see me all the time, and she's just holding one of those nice Mississippian nautiloids. One cool thing about the Smithsonian is that it has the world's largest fossil collection. We've got about 45 million fossils in our collection. So it's a remarkable collection. We hold all the fossils collected by the U.S. Geological Survey of Smithsonian paleontologists. And then we're also all the time getting new and amazing fossils. And I just started out with ironic that Bruce popped up as crab with many barnacles, because here's Bruce's crab with only 2 barnacles that he donated to us when we were building the exhibit. So thanks, Bruce, for this. I've always admired Bruce's preparation skills, because it was this very species of crab that got me really excited in paleontology. And I started finding these same kind of crabs up in the Olympic Peninsula, but I never learned how to prepare them very well. I kind of butchered them. So whenever I see Bruce's work, I'm always like, I wish I had Bruce around 25, 30 years ago, because I murdered a lot of good crabs that could have been saved if Bruce had been around. But we have, these other amazing fossils. Here's a megalodon tooth, but just squint at the owner's name there. If you look on the upper side, that is Thomas Jefferson. A third president was a paleontologist, and he had megalodon teeth in his personal collection. And the reason I bring that up is that, Jefferson was right there at the very beginning of American paleontology. He was finding fossil bones from Big Bone Lick in Kentucky as early as the 1850s and wondering what they were. And there was a guy named Charles Wilson Peale, who was a painter and a museum builder and a paleontologist. And he was trying to convince Jefferson to make a national museum. And he asked around, because people have been finding bones of mastodons and mammoths, but they never found a whole one. And he asked around, and he found a farmer in Newburgh, New York, who had found on a marl pit in his yard, had found some big bones. So Peale came up there in 1801 and excavated this pit, and you can see when digging the bones out, they uncovered a skeleton of a mastodon, but at the time, mastodons had not been described, so he called it a mammoth. As you know, they're different. And what's really cool is here's the painting of him digging it. That's him holding the diagram off in the lower right-hand corner. And here he is in a much later painting painted in 1826. It's called The Artist in His Museum. And you can see under the curtain is the mounted skeleton of that mastodon, which is now known to be a mammoth. And what's really cool is that that actual skeleton, this is it. This is the original mastodon #1 from North America, the one that was collected in Newburgh, New York in 1801. This skeleton now lives at a museum in Darmstadt in Germany. But last year, the Smithsonian mounted an exhibit about Alexander von Humboldt, and it's in the Smithsonian American Art Museum. And they convinced the guys in Darmstadt to loan us the actual skeleton from Darmstadt. So we flew at tremendous expense. We flew this skeleton from Darmstadt, Germany to Washington, D.C. And if you come to Washington now, it's on display in the American Art Museum. That's on #1 for North America. Pretty cool thing. And then here's a very early view of Washington, D.C. You can see the Smithsonian Castle there, which opened to the public in 1856. You can see the not yet complete Washington Monument going up, and there's what's called Tiber Creek, which is the location of the National Museum of Natural History today. So you can see Washington's changed quite a bit. In the early days in the castle, there was a group of guys called the Megatherium Club, and they had eventually got a cast of a big South American ground sloth called Megatherium. And there were half a dozen to a dozen guys that were young natural historians. They included this guy, Edward Drinker Cope, who was one of the great big bone war guys. And then later on, his great rival, O.C. Marsh, from Yale, got federal funding and did a lot of paleontology out in the American West. They both did a lot of work in the American West. And late in their great debate and dispute, Cope was able to sue Marsh and say, look, you got a lot of your funding came from the U.S. Geological Survey, so your fossils don't all belong to Yale. Some of them belong to the National Museum. And in fact, half of Marsh's collection had to go from New Haven, Connecticut to Washington, D.C., and it formed the core of our dinosaur collection at the National Museum. And then, of course, there's John Wesley Powell, who was the first head of the Geological Survey. So these early guys in the 1860s, 1870s started the formation of our collection. And by 1910, this building, the National Museum, opened on the mall, right across the mall from the Smithsonian Castle. And it's, and I'm now the director of. I've been the director for 8 years there. In 1911, when they opened it up, here's what their paleontology exhibit looked like. Not very much, right? A little bit sparsely filled halls. But by 1917, they're getting a few more skeletons in there. And then by 1931, they got this Diplodocus in place. And I was rummaging through my mom's papers. My mom grew up on a ranch in Wyoming down by Casper. And that's, in fact, another place where I started collecting fossils when I was a kid. And it turns out I was going through my mom's papers 2 years ago, and I found a remarkable thing. I found this. It's a letter from the Smithsonian Institution postmarked on April 16th, 1939. And it's written to Warren and Leroy Pierce in the handwriting of my grandmother. And Warren and Leroy are my uncles. And that girl on the right is my mom in 1939 in Washington, D.C. at the White House, visiting the Smithsonian. So I learned, after I'd been the director here for about 7 years, I learned that my mom had visited this museum when she was 10 years old in 1939, which is an amazing coincidence for me. And it just sort of arcs back about how important the Smithsonian has been over the last couple hundred years. And here it is today. This is the Natural History Museum today, and that's our staff and the people that work at the museum. It's an amazing place. We've got 146 million objects in our collections, about 200 scientists. We get about 5 million visitors a year. And that same hall I showed you, the fossil hall, by about 2010 had grown crazily crowded. It was jammed in. We built all sorts of ramps and walkways. You can see the same Diplodocus, same location where it was in 1931. You can see that it's just a jam. It was a horrible space. And here we were at the National Museum. And just before I got the job, the museum received a $35 million donation to renovate the hall. So I had the pleasure of being the director to oversee the renovation of this very famous 1911 hall to what it is today. And we opened it up in June of 2019. The exhibit's called Deep Time, and the basic idea of the exhibit is the Earth's distant past connected to our present and our future. So it puts humans in context of all of geology. And some of you may know the work of J. Maternus, these exquisite murals. They're 10 by 24 feet, or 12 by 24 feet, paintings, Cenozoic mammals. And you can see in the background there, there's the guy on the right is J. Maternus himself, the guy that painted these things. They were painted between 1960 and 1974. Here he is talking to Matt Carano on the left, who's the curator of dinosaurs at the museum. And one of the sad things about this exhibit was when we took the exhibit down to make the new one, we had to take these murals off the wall and roll them up. And so I thought, man, I'd love to do something about those murals because they're such spectacular things. You can see here Jay talking about it. Every one of those animals painted in great detail from the actual skeletons. And when I got to the museum, we didn't, people didn't even know Jay was still alive because the paintings were painted between 1960 and 74. And about 1982, Jay walked into the museum, hopped over the barriers and walked up and painted his copyright in the lower right-hand corner of the painting. Apparently his wife had told him he wasn't getting enough credit. So he literally, without permission, painted on the paintings. So we all thought he wasn't very happy about the museum. But when I got to the museum, I was like, I'll just see if I can find him. And I found that he was alive and well and still painting and living about 20 miles from the museum. And I went up to see him. And he has continued to work. And he's doing these incredible reconstruction. So you can see a short-faced bear, the skeleton, the muscled up animal, and the furred animal. That's a 4 by 5 foot pencil drawing, if you can believe it. So, and I was looking through his drawings, and he has probably 6,000 pencil drawings like this that were the precursor images to those great big murals. And, he turned out to be very interested in the museum. And I asked him what he was intending to do with all the drawings. And he said, it's quite a coincidence, Kirk, because just a week ago, and this is the week before I met him, just a week ago, I went to my lawyer and added a codicil to my will to donate all of these drawings to the Smithsonian. I was like, that's good news. And you'll see a little bit later what came of it. And then we had a lot of tremendous specimens. Here's a Zafactinus from Kansas that we were moving out of the old exhibit and getting ready for the new exhibit. I also took the team that was going to be working on the exhibit out to dig fossils. A lot of these people are exhibit designers or writers or museum technicians who've never been collecting fossils. We took them out to the Hell Creek Formation in North Dakota, where I do a lot of work, just to show them what it was like to go out and actually find fossils in the Badlands. And that was a great way to start the game, because they realized what paleontology was all about, and it gave us a great inspired and excited crew to work on this exhibit. And one of the people that came out to see us is that woman right in the middle there wearing the light blue shirt. And her name is Kathy Wankel, and she's the person who discovered the T-Rex in the Fort Peck Reservoir in 1988. That was called the Wankel Rex. It's one of the most complete T-Rexes ever found. And that specimen had gone to the Museum of the Rockies. And ironically, the Smithsonian did not have a T-Rex. And I felt if we're going to rebuild the National Fossil Hall, we really need a T-Rex. And it turned out that Kathy had found the fossil on Army Corps of Engineer land, which meant that it wasn't owned by the Museum of the Rockies. In fact, they had 2 T-Rexes from Army Corps. And we chatted with Jack Horner, and here's Jack Horner and Matt Carano in the storage facility at the Museum of the Rockies. And we cut a deal with Jack and the Museum of the Rockies and the Army Corps of Engineers, actually based in Portland. This is Tony Funkhauser, general from the Army Corps. And we were able to acquire that T-Rex and bring it back to Washington, D.C. And when you want to move a T-Rex, you FedEx it. So I got FedEx to give us a truck. We painted a T-Rex on it. And here is Matt Carano in Bozeman, Montana, with a bronze sculpture of that animal being loaded up. And we took it back to Washington, D.C. and unpacked it. And here's Kathy Wankel and one of the generals from the Corps of Army Engineers, and just the femur of that T-Rex. And that was a great way to launch the project. We also had this young kid, Skip Homer, who about 2 or 3 weeks after I arrived in the museum in 2012, showed up at the visitor desk, and he had a box of cash that he wanted to give to the museum so we'd renovate the dinosaur hall. And his timing was perfect, because that kicked off our fundraising effort to get the hall going. And here he is getting credit for being our first donor. He gave us $284 to get the donations going at the start. And here's the mounted skeleton of that T-Rex munching on a prone Triceratops skeleton. Meanwhile, we tore out the entire infrastructure of that hall, taking it back to its 1910, even pre-1910, exposing the structural steel. And because we had to replace and repair all the plaster, we put scaffolding all the way up to the ceiling. It's a 60-foot high ceiling, and redid all the original plaster work. Meanwhile, we were out collecting more fossils. And here's Ray Kroll again and Jim Baechtel up in Alaska. And we had been doing a filming thing for Making North American. We found this incredible palm frond on the beach in Alaska. And boy, if 2 words, palm and Alaska, don't go together, those are the 2 words. And that specimen turned out to be a really nice piece. Here's it coming together. And eventually we mounted it on the wall in the new exhibit. It's this gigantic Alaskan palm frond, 7 feet wide from end to end. And you can see here's the scaffolding going all the way up to that space. Here's way up on top of that scaffolding, 50 feet above the ground. We can see how we rip out the old plaster and repair it. This is 1910 plaster. And then we did all the restoration work, and then we just kept lowering that floor down and finishing the entire hall. Meanwhile, Matt Carano was remounting all of our skeletons. Here's a this is a mammoth skeleton. And the way we've been working at these things, we actually start with a 3D digital model and then mount things in 3D digital and mount the skeleton. Here's our Irish elk skeleton. And Matt had the great idea of putting this one on its knees so you could actually be eye level to that huge rack of antlers. Here's Coral and Whitney, one of our board members, next to our Stegosaurus mount. And here's that mammoth again. Here's the 3D print of the mammoth. We start with that and we get to this, start with that 3D print and you get back to that full mount. So you can see how we can work things digitally before we mount them. It makes it a lot easier to mount those things. And then here's another view of the T-Rex, the Triceratops. There's on the left is a nesting Allosaurus, on the right's the mammoth, in the distance is the Irish elk. And here's a picture of the team that's worked on it. This is the Deep Time team that we had working for 5 years to build this 31,000 square foot, $40 million exhibit. And then there's an artist in Vancouver, British Columbia, named Julius Shistoni, and who does amazing paintings. And here's just a couple of his paintings. He did over 50 paintings for the hall, these different scenes of different geologic past scenes. And then we did a number of other very complicated prep work. This is a Stegosaurus skeleton collected by O.C. Marsh in Colorado in the 1870s from a place called the Marsh Filch Quarry. We call it the roadkill stegosaur because it's just one entire articulated flattened specimen. And we mounted this vertically so you can see how fossils are when they come out of the ground. That's about 25 feet long. We also had a really nice big giant Eremotherium ground sloth from Panama. And here's the Army Corps of Engineers, very proud of their T-Rex as it's going into the exhibit. Those are all generals you're looking at there. And I've been chasing for a long time this specimen. This is probably one of the best fossil specimens ever found in North America. It was found in 2003 at the Fossil Buttes in a quarry by a guy named Jim Tinsky, and he held on to it for a long time. And when I became the director at the museum, I knew I wanted to get this incredible fossil. And it's an incredible fossil. It's got every single bone. There's no repaired cracks in this thing. Came out in a single block. The animal is 100% complete. Every single bone in his body is there. Half a dozen fish for good measure. And it's one of these early horses from about 52 million years old in Wyoming. And I always just loved this fossil. And I finally was able to figure out how to acquire it for the National Museum. And that's kind of one of my jobs at the National Museum, is to find the best fossils and make sure they end up in the National Repository where everybody can see them. And I was really pleased to get this one. And this one tells a pretty cool story of a horse that died and floated out in the middle of a lake and sank to the bottom. And there's this great picture in National Geographic of a cougar lying at the bottom of the lake. And it's just such a story of how that skeleton got to be there. Just it died and floated out, and nothing tore it apart. It just lay in the bottom, got buried by mud, and became an amazing fossil. We also did a lot of other cool projects on this exhibit, including building a climate timeline for the last 500 million years. Did a lot of cool stuff. That's Scott Wing, our curator of paleobotany, standing in winter in Wyoming, holding a picture of an alligator, which is the kind of animal that lived at that very spot in the warm Eocene. Then the other thing I got thinking was, nobody had ever made a full life-size scale model of a megalodon before. We'd all seen pictures of big megalodons, but I was like, you know, I'm the director of this museum. I'm going to make a megalodon. So I contracted Gary Staub to build a full life-size 52-foot-long megalodon. And he built it out of fiberglass and installed it in our cafeteria area. It's an unbelievably big, amazing, beautiful model of that gigantic Miocene shark. Then in June of 2019, this is the main rotunda of the museum. You can see the elephant there. We've got a 50-foot high cloth describing a Carboniferous forest. There's the projections of all ancient worlds, and these are all the Washington elites. And we opened the exhibit to the public. We had Mr. Bones from Colorado. And here's that young Skip Homer, who was the original donor #1, who got to lead the crowd into the museum when we opened it on June 9th. We've been closed due to COVID since March 14th. So this exhibit had been open for about 6 months, and then we closed it, and it's just waiting to reopen once the COVID gets done. And here's a picture of the shark flying over our cafeteria. And here's a book that came out about the making of this exhibit, Extinct Monster to Deep Time, written by Diana Marsh, one of our curatorial assistants. And Matt Carano and I did a nice book about the paleo art of J. Maternus, which has not only all of his murals, but also many, many of those pencil drawings I showed you in the background. And then we had these 4 Julius Stoni images done for the exhibit that became stamps, the T-Rex stamps as well. So that's a quick and dirty run through the making of the Deep Time Hall. And I'm just waiting for the time when we can actually open back up and let people back into the hall. Typically, we'll see about 4 or 5 million visitors a year. So it's going to be the most visited fossil hall in the world. But this last year, we had 1 million visitors between January 1st and March 14th, and then we closed it, and it's been shut ever since. And every day I'm about the only person in the museum, and I walk through the hall by myself, just thinking, one of these days, people will be back in the museum. So I thought I'd just stop there and let you guys ask any questions you want about that. But I wanted to thank Bruce for his donation, and also Kent for great support on the fossils coming into the museum. And you guys do great work at NARG. It's the people who love fossils that find the good ones. And just know when you find really rare stuff, the Smithsonian is ready to talk to you.
Yeah, when you come down, Kirk, I may want to talk to you.
Sounds good, Kent. You always have good stuff. I met Kent. He was holding a marlin skull in his arms, and I thought this is going to be a good relationship.
And I did donate a couple of pine cones and a leaf to University of Oregon when Greg Rictalik stopped by here a couple of months ago or whenever it was. So just thought I'd let you know.
That's good. It sounds like the University of Oregon is getting a pretty good collection these days.
Well, I just wonder if they have quite enough room if I end up donating most of mine eventually.
They're
Well, you do a pretty
working
good
on
job of
room.
filling your back room up there, Kent.
I built another room next to my woodshed just for, I got like 3 racks in there, and I moved them all out of the old garage area out to there. But then I set up my sandblaster, and all the skulls I kept still in the house here, basically.
It's a common disease of running out of room when you're a fossil collector.
Well, yeah, I've already got a few in the back of my truck. I probably got, I don't know, maybe 15 or 20 pieces of bone in the back of my truck already.
Keep hunting. It's going to be good stuff out there.
Yeah.
Kirk,
Yeah.
regarding the museum, is entry there timed so that it doesn't get so crowded, or does it like fill up?
Well, we used to not have any timing at all. And on a typical day, we could have as many as 6,000 people in the building at any one time. So I've had a couple of days where we had 30,000 people through in a day. But boy, once COVID came, we were closed, but we did open a few of the other Smithsonian museums, and we have started doing time ticketing. So I think that even when we get open again, we'll start doing time ticketing. We've been doing it at the African American Museum. It works really well, and it spreads the crowd out a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
And in the post-COVID world, I'm sure we'll be in a time ticketing landscape.
And to travel all that way to see something and then be stuck in a crowd.
Yeah, well, the thing is that crowds are huge between spring break and August. Those are the peak crowds. If you want to come when you get the place to yourself, come in September, come in January or February. We'll have many fewer people there. So you can kind of plan your trips, because it is pretty unpleasant when the cherry blossoms are going on and through the summer when you've got really heavy crowds. And it's also extraordinarily hot in Washington, D.C. in the summer. It's not really a place to visit in the summer. But September is really nice weather, and there's not a soul there. Everybody's gone back to school. So that's my recommendation for a visit.
Can you mention something about the collections that are down in the cellars of the building? A lot of people aren't familiar with that.
Well, we've got the building on the mall is 1.3 million square feet, and we have a second building about 8 miles away that's about 1 million square feet. So we have 2.3 million square feet. Of that, 300,000 square feet is public space, which means that 2 million square feet is behind the scenes. And it's literally miles and miles and miles of cabinets. We have fossils in many locations. We did actually acquire the majority of the Doug Emlon collection. So we have a lot of Doug Emlon stuff from the West Coast, a lot of which is not prepared yet, actually, including some very large concretion. I don't have no idea how that guy moved some of these things. So there's concretions about half the size of a Volkswagen. But we also have the National Whale Collection that is literally dozens of complete whale skeletons. including complete blue whale skeletons. That's in a gigantic building with gigantic shelves that go to all the ceiling. We have a couple of complete blue whale skulls that are like 25 feet long, just a skull. So it's in a remarkable collection, and it covers the whole realm of fossils, rocks, minerals, gemstones, then all kinds of living things, any living organism, all the way from crabs to whales, and then of course human cultural artifacts and archaeology. And it's just an amazing behind the scenes. I've got a key that's the #1 key for the whole complex, the director, which is the best thing ever. And I get bored of collections, and they're literally collection rooms I've never even been to. There's so many collection rooms. It's a phenomenal behind the scenes spot. We get about 10,000 visiting scientists a year to work in the collections. It's a massive facility.
Kirk, there's a question in the chat from Brandon. And he'd like to know what kind of curriculum you guys have to support the work. He's curious about middle school and high school curriculum in particular.
The Smithsonian is a complicated beast. We have 19 museums. I'm just one of 19 museums. We have 9 research centers and the National Zoo. And then we have a bunch of other different entities. And there's one called the Smithsonian Science Education Center. And that group does nothing but make curricula. So you can go to a thing called the Smithsonian Learning Lab. I think it's just learninglab.si.edu. And that's where we aggregate all of our curriculum materials. So just type in Learning Lab when you search, or Smithsonian Science Education Center. But they literally do curricula for schools all across the country. And all told, like I say, my museum is huge, but I'm only 10% of the Smithsonian. There's about 6,500 employees at the Smithsonian right now.
He had a follow-up question. Are you guys ever looking for assistance with people writing curriculum to share?
Sometimes, and that's done through SSEC. So you'd write Carol O'Donnell is her name, is the director of SSEC, and she's the person that hires people to do curriculum development.
Okay, others with questions? This is your chance, everybody.
What's going on with you, Ruth? Are you doing good fossil work these days?
Yeah, working on fossil aeroids mostly.
Really?
Yeah, we got some Aeraceae spadices from Paleocene of Alberta, and another one from the Eocene of Vancouver Island. And we've been writing a kind of a memorial thing to Joseph Bogner, who recently died.
I saw that he passed away. Yeah.
Yeah, so we wrote an article on Joseph's influence on paleobotany. So, all the places where he was involved and all the people he's, that acknowledge him for help and specimens and whatever. So we got you in there.
Excellent, excellent.
Yeah.
I've got that a few more aeroids we should talk about from the Licking Leaves site. I'd love you guys to look at too.
Oh, yes. Yes, please.
Never want your aeroid inbox to be empty.
Yeah, no kidding. Georgia will be very happy. So
yeah, one of the things about being closed for the last year is I had a chance to go back and kind of catch up where I left off. Because when I moved from Denver, I went from some research to no research, and I had lots of projects that were kind of stopped right in the middle. And this last year, I've had a chance to go back and reorganize my files and figure out where everything is, and relocate a bunch of my localities. And we're doing some work, in North Dakota again. So hopefully want to go back to Licking Leaves a little bit more, because that site has such beautiful preservation and such great fossils.
yeah, some people have found that, I guess, I don't know who it was that found the attached flowers of limnobiophyllum now. Yeah, somebody has. I can't remember now. Spicer, I don't know, somebody. Yeah, I mean, there was a recent paper where they found the flowers actually attached. So,
wow.
Yeah, so I'm hoping when Licking Leaves we'll be able to find something. That preservation there is so great,
Yeah.
All the trichomes on the leaves and everything in that site. So
It's
It'd be
exquisite.
really
Well, if you
nice.
think about it, send me a copy of that new paper.
Yeah, okay, yeah. You remember who wrote that?
No, but I can go.
No,
look
we'll
up,
find
yeah.
it in a second.
Okay.
Brain's gone. COVID brain.
Yeah, I know exactly. I know what you're talking about.
So you
See,
got steroids, do you? Well,
Yeah,
get the-
no, I keep trickling them out to you guys to keep you something to live for. You gotta have a steady stream of aeroid inbox.
Yeah,
Okay,
well,
we're ready.
yeah, get to cracking. You're gonna have to have something to do in your spare time.
No, exactly. I'm definitely jonesing for a little bit of fossil activity.
Yeah,
Can't run the museum all day long.
yeah. Well, maybe we should drop by and see you. We got a bunch of stuff to bring back anyway. Don't you, Ruth?
I do.
Yeah,
What?
all of those eye specimens.
Oh, God, yeah.
Yeah.
Have you guys, have you been to the Denver collection since we renovated them?
No, no.
Oh, we have a beautiful collection facility in Denver now. It's all underground. All the fossils are in brand new cases. It's really lovely.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, we've been dealing with Gary a little because we've got, like I got 3 papers either in press or out with Gary and Ludo, our student working on fossil fungi on the leaves. And so he just sent us some more Potomac group sediment for maceration for leaf with fossil fungi on the leaf surfaces. So
Nice.
yeah, the recent PhD was last December. Ludovic Renard, he's at UBC with Mary Burby, but I was his co-supervisor. And so we've been doing that and working with Gary, doing that stuff. And we've got, 3 different taxa out on fossil fungi, but they were on gymnosperms from Potomac group and nobody studied the gymnosperms from Potomac group. So we don't know what the hell the hosts are. So we've been, trying to figure that out.
I mean, I live in a 13-story building in Washington, D.C., and for the last year, they were digging a building across the street. And I look out off my porch straight into the construction site. And it's all Potomac group right out the window. There's
Oh.
rare outcrops.
Jeez.
Yeah. Grab some.
I tried to, but the building got through in too fast. But I can get more. We'll get some.
Yeah, Ludo is postdocing now with Mary at UBC, so he should be able to get some of that stuff prepared up and macerated. He did his dissertation on microtheraceous fungi, this great big group that produces these, scutella on the leaf surface. And he did a whole DNA study of all the group using molecular shit. And then he went and did a morphological study of all of these things on the leaf surfaces. And then we went back and looked at the fossils from Potomac and sort of figured out where they belonged. It was really cool because he has a lot of information in his head now about what the living ones do. And so you can look at the fossils with some meaning as opposed to here's a fungus, because fungus, fungi are pretty tough, but he's really got a handle on it. So it's a good opportunity for us to study fossil fungi. So
Excellent.
that's what I've been doing in my spare time other than aeroids and Ericaria.
Ruth and Gar, was it Sue Tao's group?
Taiwanioids.
Was it Sue Tao's group working in Tibet for the limnobiofilm?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
What's the name?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Low.
I know Sue Tao. I don't know the other authors though. It's Shukling Lo, Sue Tao, Teresa Spicer. So Jack Spicer wasn't. Teresa Spicer was on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So it's 2018 or 2019. I can't remember which. But yeah, I'll send you a copy.
2020.
Was it?
Volume 18, Journal of Systematic Paleontology.
Oh, okay.
Right.
I have it up right now. So.
Excellent.
Nice.
Send it to Kirk.
Yeah, send it to me.
Yeah. How are you doing, Mackenzie?
I'm doing good. Working on Clarno leaves right now, so that's what I've been up to, doing some clamp analysis, and have 2 of them ID'd as of last week. So we've got some Malotus, which is an E4B ACE, and this is based on using illustrations by McGinnity and the Chalk Bluffs flora. But then we also have some Rhamnaceae, and I'm blanking on the genus right now. It's Baramnophyllum. And so we have Baramnophyllum down in the Claiborne group, southeastern US. But what's interesting is that we don't have any rhamnaceous fruits or rhamnaceous woods. So this will be the first occurrence of Rhamnaceae for the Clarno. And I think we do have it in the pollen records, because I've seen some trigonal bits of pollen, and I thought they were Simplicaceae at first, but I think it makes more sense that those actually might be rhamnaceous pollen grains. So that's what I've been up to.
Cool.
Where did those specimens come from in the Clarno?
The nut beds.
Nut
part
bed,
of it.
okay.
Yeah, these are all nut beds. Yeah.
Mhm.
That's good.
There
There's
was another question. Sorry, go ahead, Kirk.
Yeah, I was just saying, question in the chat about any new books in the works,
Yeah.
and I'm actually finished with it. When I finished the Jay Maternus book, I was kind of suddenly without a book, because we published Ray's Cruising the Coastline book, which is a 10-year project, Maternus. So we're kicking around a couple of ideas right now. Ray and I are thinking about doing a book about the Eastern United States, because we did middle and the West, might as well do the East. That would give us a chance to go from Florida up the coast. But we haven't decided that's the case. We're thinking about it, and I think we're going to go we were supposed to go to Florida last March and start poking around and see if we get it started. Because usually with Ray and I on the books, we do a couple of trips and meet some people. And then once we get started, there's no turning back. But we haven't quite launched that. And our publisher just sold us to a new publisher in Chicago. We're talking to them tomorrow morning. So we'll see what's going on that front. But I'm working on a new Nova show, which is pretty interesting. That's I did Polar Extremes. If you've seen Polar Extremes or not yet, it aired in February 5th, and you can stream it online. But what I'm working on now is set in White Sands National Park down by Alamogordo in New Mexico. There's these great gypsum sand dunes, but they're adjacent to this great Playa Lake. And it turns out that the exposed surface of the Playa Lake is Pleistocene. It's a Pleistocene surface. And it's just covered with footprints of mammoths and camels and giant sloths and people. There's tons of human footprints. And it's amazing because, human footprints from the Pleistocene in North America are basically unknown. And there are literally thousands of human footprints. And there are humans walking in groups. There's humans walking individually. There are people dragging things. There's a single trackway that walks due north for 2.5 miles. And it's a person carrying a kid, and about every 30 or 40 steps, they put the kid down and the kid walks for a few steps. And they get to the north and the track dissipates off to the north, but then coming the same direction going due south is the same person walking south without the kid. So either they took the kid to the babysitter or they fed it to a saber-toothed cat or whatever, who knows. But there's also, on that same trackway, when the person was walking north, after he walked north, a ground sloth walked by and sniffed at his footprints and walked away. You can see where the ground sloth stepped on the human footprints. And when the human came south, the human looked at the ground sloth footprints and walked around them and kept walking south. And there are places where there's human footprints inside mammoth footprints and mammoth footprints on top of human footprints. And it's just an incredible discovery. It was found by a ranger at White Sands in the summer of 2018. And he gave a talk at the North American Paleo Convention in Riverside. And I listened to him give the talk, and it blew my mind. And I called up Nova, and we immediately cut a deal to do a TV show about it. And we now have a radiometric date. We found a place where the track layer goes into the bank, and we've got a radiometric date above and below the track layer. So we know how old it is, but they're not going to tell me, because when they tell me, I have to be on camera and I have to express surprise. So I don't know what the date is yet, but I know we have a date. So stay tuned. We filmed about a week of it in January, and then we ran out because of the COVID thing. So as soon as I can travel, I'm going to go back to Alamogordo and finish the shoot and finish the story. But it's a really cool Ice Age site. That's kind of the next project that's in the bag for me, is to get that done. And then I just been kicking around other ideas for books. So whether it's I also don't like to not be working on a book with Ray Troll. Sort of, I normally am working on some sort of aeroid thing with Ruth and Gar and some sort of book with Troll. And that's sort of my life. And then the other thing that's happening that's relevant to you guys is that the Stone Rose Center in Republic, Washington just invested in a new building. They purchased a big building on the corner of Main Street. They kind of overextended themselves and have tried to really grow up the Stone Rose Center and make it into more of a proper museum. And they're you got a pretty active group there. But if you've never been up to Republic, Washington, that's a pretty sweet fossil site with some incredible Eocene fossils that you can excavate. And that museum there should sort of flesh out pretty well over the next couple of years. Because they used to be in a little tiny cabin, and now they've got about I think a 2,000 square foot storefront on Main Street in Republic.
Yeah,
So when you come, oh, go ahead.
sorry, it's been a long time since I've been to Republic. Ages and ages.
Yeah, I went by, I was there this summer, actually stopped by and dropped by, and still going and blowing.
So when you come to visit us in Florida, when it's safe to come visit us in Florida, are you going to stop by Montbrook or Thomas Farm?
Yeah, that was the
Both of
plan.
them?
I wanted to get Ray down there to get out and do some digging there. And that, the trick is always with Ray is you got to get him hooked. Once you get him hooked, it's no problem. He just moves on forward. But so I like to take him to a really good fossil site. He might find himself a nice rhinoceros tooth or something like that. And then that'll be good. We'll be off and running on our next project. So when you work with artists, you have to kind of manage them a little bit.
Well, Montbrook would definitely be a good place to take them because you can find just whole turtles there. So you're definitely guaranteed to find stuff at Montbrook. I've worked it several times, many times. So
Perfect. Yeah, that was the plan. I talked to the guys at Gainesville. We're going to give a couple talks there and then do a little dig, but that all got squeezed out by the pandemic. Did I grind you guys into the dirt here?
Speak up, folks. Whoever's got questions, this is your chance. I know you guys have questions.
Okay, when are you going to be out to Newport, you think?
Well, I talked to Frank Boyden today, actually. I mean, as soon as I can, I'm dying to travel. I normally travel all the time, but I've been parked in Washington, D.C. for the last 9 months, just sitting and waiting this thing out. So once we can travel, I'll be out to Newport. And, we definitely are moving the show down there. The show opened at the Burke last month, but the Burke isn't open. So the show is up, but you can't go see it. But it'll be up through, I think it'll be up through July or something like that. And after that, it's going to pick up and move down to Newport to the aquarium.
Okay.
So, and I think it'll be at the aquarium in Newport for a whole year. So it'll be a good long run. It's a nice show. It's basically all the original art from the Cruising the Fossil Coastline book, but we like to enhance it with local fossils. So for the Newport thing, it'll be like, that fossil event you have in Newport every year.
Except for this year.
Yeah, we should do a year, we should do a bigger version of that for the exhibit, just have a bunch of stuff on display for several months instead of just of a day. Be a good chance to show up a lot of cool local fossils.
Yeah, I actually talked to a lady from the aquarium. She was over looking at stuff and kind of getting an idea what some of the stuff might be available.
That'll be good. It's really nice. With these traveling exhibits, we like to do is borrow local fossils. So you don't have to move the fossils, but you tell the story really well. And the exhibit looks great. I just saw a video of it today. I haven't seen it myself yet either. Have you seen anybody here been to the new Burke Museum?
No.
They completely tore down the old building and built a new building next to it. Brand new museum with some gorgeous stuff in it. It's a nice new addition to Seattle. Worth the drive when you can actually do it.
Yeah, I was supposed to go up to Anchorage when that was up there, and then like 2 weeks before COVID hit, and so our trip got canceled. So
yeah, it's very inconvenient.
So
you guys getting out digging fossils now, even though, because fossil digging is probably something you can do with COVID.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time on the beach here in the last year or so. I mean, quite a bit. You know me, I was down there in 2 years day and found one within a couple hours of daylight.
The Parks Department opened up the beaches pretty soon after they first shut it down, and so they're open and available for people to go out and collect.
That's good.
Yeah, I never had a problem with that.
Yeah.
I just went.
As a club, we did some field trips to Central Oregon last year because social distancing is pretty easy to do in Central Oregon.
Boy, isn't that the truth?
Though, if you get out to Mitchell, they have a new brew pub out there. It's really good.
No,
It is
interesting.
good.
That's another trend. A lot of these small towns have their own brew pubs now. Makes travel to small towns all that much more fun. Do they have a brew pub in Fossil yet?
No, I was there earlier. I didn't see one.
Because they really need a Fossil brew pub, as far as I'm concerned.
I agree.
So many different possible beer names.
Yeah. Well, we've been catching up on all the old manuscripts that have been hanging over our head that we haven't finished for the years. I think I completed 13 this year. 13.
Oh my God.
papers. Yeah, I'm really
You
tired
really are
now.
ready for another dose of RAC, aren't you?
Yeah, there you go.
The inbox is empty. I love it.
Yeah. There's a lot of old stuff. Gar had stuff from the 70s he finished up. Really.
Wow.
Yeah. At a time where you just can't do anything else, you know?
Yeah, no, if you're cleaning up 50-year-old messes, you know you've got time in your hands.
Crazy.
One
Really?
place we're definitely going back to that you guys would be interested in is Beulah Reservoir out in Eastern Oregon. A few of us went out there last fall, and it's got great leaf preservation out there.
Huh. What age is it? Miocene?
To be honest, I have to look it up. I think so. I think it's Miocene.
Yeah.
I think it's about 13 million,
Okay, yeah.
about
Very good.
middle
That's the
Miocene.
sticking water
Yeah.
flora.
Oh, I should show you guys one thing. At Snowmass, we collected a really nice bison latifront skull. When we found it, we thought, we found a horn first. We thought it was a tusk because it was so big that the horn was like this big around. And we got the whole skull, and it was just an incredible specimen. And the guys at Denver ended up making casts and molds of it. So I acquired one for my kitchen. So I'll show it to you right now.
Oh boy. What is that? About 8 feet across?
It's 7 feet 2 inches, broken horn tip to broken horn tip. So it would have been like a 10-foot span. That was definitely the best fossil I've ever found. I'll tell you what.
That's great.
Makes a good kitchen sink kind of thing.
Hey,
And-
who would be a good person for me to talk to about 3D modeling, scanning, and stuff like that? I've been doing a lot of that with fossils.
So the Smithsonian has an entire whole branch that does that. We have a thing called I think if you just type into your browser, just type in Smithsonian 3D, because we have like 3D mammoths and everything, and there's a whole group of people devoted to scanning and printing and sharing different models there. And so that's there's probably a dozen people working on that particular project, and they've done it for all sorts of collections, not just fossils, but everything else too. But they're kind of leading. They even scanned a 30-foot long fossil whale and did a half-size printout of the entire skeleton. Did a 15-foot long 3D printout.
Okay, sounds good.
Definitely changed the game for sure. And I've been trying to get them because we have these these CT scanners. You can actually scan rocks, and we're trying to get to the point where we can scan a concretion and then print out the fossil that's inside the concretion without opening the concretion up.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we did that with a saber-tooth salmon skull here that the club actually bought online from eBay in 2018. No kidding. The guy dug it up in 1980
Yeah.
in Central Oregon. And it's sitting down at OMSI because, the University of Oregon doesn't have any room for it. And so I did outside laser scan of it. And then we hauled it over to Oregon Health University and did a CT scan. And I merged those two together.
Oh, wow.
So now we got a full internal and external scan of the world's best saber-tooth salmon.
That's great. Now, Ray was telling me about that. That's a pretty amazing specimen.
Yeah, I sent him a copy of it.
Yeah. But eBay is good for something, huh?
Yeah, it was lots of fun.
That's good. Well, I think I'll sign off. It's 11 o'clock my time,
Yep.
so I'm a little bit sleepy, and I got to go finish scrubbing all those people out of the Capitol building.
Well, tell everyone because you mentioned it before people joined, the little bit of trouble you had at the Smithsonian with the events of today, the outhouse.
Oh yeah, so obviously my job to keep the Smithsonian building safe, and there were about 30,000 people in the mall with sort of mischief in mind. But the only problem we had was at one point about 60 people broke into one of our porta potties because they were desperate. So I had to dispatch my security guards to guard our porta potties, but other than that, we're fine.
Jeez.
It was my patriotic duty for the day.
Well, we thank you for that. And on behalf of everybody here, I know everybody would thank you and shake your hand if you were a person. Thank you so much, Kirk, for spending time with us. We really appreciate it at this late hour. It means a lot for you to spend time. And we're all very pleased with all the work you're doing. You're doing a fantastic job with the Smithsonian. We all enjoy the movies, looking forward to the new one. And you'll see a bunch of your books purchased online now that I know I got 6 more to go.
Thanks, Aaron. Thanks, everybody. You guys do a great job at NARG, and it's great to see everybody happy and healthy. And hopefully we'll be able to chat together in person sometime next year once the smoke clears. So have a good evening, and thanks for your service, as they say.
Send those aeroids. Keep those aeroids coming.
Okay, aeroids headed your way. Send me that paper.
All right, I'm working on it. I'm having trouble with the university access right now for it. I'm off campus, so
Okay,
I'm trying to sign in for
I'll
it.
try to find it here.
perfect. Thanks, you guys.
Okay,
It was
Good night, Kirk.
2019. Yeah,
Bye.
thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
thanks.
All right.